2024, the average American household spent just over $77,000. That is the highest number ever recorded. And yet, consumer confidence that same year hit its lowest point in a decade. People were spending more than ever and feeling worse about it than ever. That is not a contradiction. That is a signal. Most people have been told the problem is discipline, spend less, budget harder, cut the latte. And look, that advice made sense in a different era, when the dollar you handed over actually returned something close to its face value. But something has fundamentally shifted. Prices didn't just go up. The value came down at the same time. You are now paying premium prices for products that have been quietly hollowed out, and the gap between what things cost and what they are worth has never been wider. So the real question isn't whether you're spending too much. It's whether what you're spending on still deserves it. That distinction is what this video is about, because the habits that were reasonable 5 years ago are quietly working against you now, and nobody has laid out exactly where the damage is happening. My name is Alex, and if you've ever paid for something and immediately felt like you overpaid, without being able to explain why, stay with this, because that feeling has a mechanism behind it. And I'm going to show you which 11 spending categories have turned into the worst value trades of 2026, and what to do instead. Once you understand where the value actually went, you'll stop mistaking familiarity for a good deal. The daily drain is where most people feel it first. Here is something worth thinking about before we get into the numbers. The companies behind your daily spending didn't raise prices because their costs went up. Some did, but a lot of them raised prices because they could, and because you kept paying. That is a different problem entirely. And once you see it, the math in your daily routine starts to look very different. Let's start with food delivery, because this is where the gap between perception and reality is the most brutal. When apps like DoorDash and Uber Eats launched, they were deliberately cheap, heavily subsidized by venture capital. The whole strategy was to get you hooked on the convenience, normalize the behavior, build the habit, and then once the habit was solid, raise the price. That phase is over. You are now in the extraction phase. Here's how the math actually works. Take a burrito from a mid-level Mexican spot. In the restaurant, it runs about $13 to $15. Order it through the app, and the restaurant has already marked it up, because the platform charges them a commission between 15 and 30%. Then the app adds a service fee on top, then a delivery fee, then taxes. Then the tip prompt makes you feel guilty for choosing anything under 20%. If you are paying for a monthly subscription to waive the delivery fee, your burrito costs around $22. If you are not subscribed, that same burrito approaches $29. You are paying a 100% premium for the privilege of not standing up. Marcus works in logistics in Atlanta, makes about $86,000 a year. Solid income. He was ordering delivery 4 to 5 times a week, lunches mostly, the occasional dinner when work ran long. He never thought of himself as someone with a spending problem. Then he actually pulled his bank statements. Delivery apps alone were costing him between $400 and $450 a month, nearly $5,500 a year, after taxes. That is money he already paid income tax on, going to a platform that takes a cut, a driver who gets less than he thinks, and a restaurant that nets almost nothing on the transaction. Nobody in that chain is winning except the app. Now here is the part that genuinely surprises people. Fast food used to be the safety net, the fallback when money was tight. In the 80s and 90s, you could feed yourself for under $2. The entire value proposition was speed and price. That proposition is gone. A standard combo meal at most major chains currently runs between $17 and $20. That is not a large size. That is not a specialty item. That is a regular meal. A sit-down restaurant in the same neighborhood charges roughly the same amount. And the food is fresher, the portions are bigger, and nobody processed it in a factory outside of Cincinnati. The price gap has disappeared. The quality gap hasn't. The only exception worth mentioning is the Costco food court. The hot dog and soda combo is still $1.50. It has been $1.50 since 1985. That is either the most impressive inflation hedge in American retail history or a deliberate loss leader. Either way, it is the one fast food deal that still exists. Then there is the daily coffee and beverage habit, and this is where the numbers get quietly devastating. A specialty drive-through coffee currently runs between $7 and $9. Add a pastry, and you're at $13 to $15 before 9 in the morning. Do that 5 days a week. and you're spending between $260 and $300 a month on breakfast alone. That is before lunch, before dinner, before delivery. Put that in direct terms, your morning routine currently costs more than the average American car payment in 1995. Adjusted for what that actually meant to a household budget, then you are spending serious money on something that is gone in 20 minutes. The daily drain is real, and it compounds quietly. But what makes it harder to see is that most people assume they are being smart when they hunt for deals. The thrift run, the luxury splurge that will last forever, the protein snack that feels like a health investment, that instinct to find value, it's being used against you, and that is exactly where the deals that aren't start. There is a particular kind of financial pain that nobody talks about. It is not the pain of overspending recklessly. It is the pain of trying to be smart, doing the research, hunting the deal, making the responsible choice, and still losing. That one stings differently, because the system that used to reward careful shoppers has been quietly restructured around them. Start with thrift stores, because the story here is almost poetic in how badly it went wrong. For decades, secondhand shopping was one of the most reliable value plays available to anyone on a budget. You could walk into a Goodwill or a Salvation Army with $40 and walk out with genuine wool sweaters, leather belts, silk blouses, real materials built to last, priced at a fraction of what they originally cost. The whole model worked because thrifting was invisible, unglamorous, something people did quietly and didn't post about. Then it went viral. Once thrifting became an aesthetic, a TikTok trend, a personality trait, a form of conspicuous frugality, the economics broke almost immediately. Resellers flooded the stores, buying up anything with perceived value and flipping it online at 3 to 4 times the price. The stores themselves noticed the demand and adjusted their pricing upward. What's left on the racks now is almost entirely discarded fast fashion, thin polyester, pilling fabric, shirts that were cheaply made, cheaply sold, cheaply worn, and cheaply donated. And they are priced at $8 to $12, which is frequently more than they cost brand new at the original retailer. You are paying secondhand prices for items that were never worth buying the first time. The people who relied on thrift stores most, people stretching a tight budget, have been effectively priced out by a trend they never asked to be part of. But the quality collapse isn't only happening at the bottom of the market, it's happening at the very top too. And that might be the more revealing story. Over the last 15 years, the price of a classic luxury handbag from a major European house has increased by roughly 500%. A bag that costs $1,500 in 2010 costs $8,000 to $10,000 today. And the instinct is to assume that kind of price increase must reflect something. Craftsmanship, materials, exclusivity. It doesn't. The hardware that used to be solid brass or gold-plated is now painted zinc. The leather is thinner. The stitching is looser. Several major houses have shifted production in ways that would have been considered brand damaging a generation ago. What you're buying at 5 figures is not a better product. It is a more expensive logo on a faster produced item. Fast luxury. The same model as fast fashion, just with a different font on the label. Jennifer is a marketing director in Chicago. She saved for 8 months to buy a designer bag she'd wanted since college. Paid just over $4,000. Within 18 months, the stitching on one handle had started to separate. She brought it in for repair. The brand quoted her $600 to fix it. She paid it, because the alternative was admitting the whole thing was a mistake. That is how the psychology works. The higher the initial price, the more committed you become to believing it was worth it. The industry understands this completely. Then there is the grocery aisle version of the same trick. The wellness industry figured out something simple and extremely profitable. Take a processed cookie, add a few grams of whey protein, print the word protein in large font on the front, charge $4 to $6 more than the regular version, sitting 2 shelves down. The actual nutritional difference is negligible. The hunger response is often worse, because heavily processed foods, regardless of what's been added, digest quickly and leave you reaching for something else within the hour. A boiled egg has more usable protein than most of these products and costs 30 cents. But it doesn't have a gradient label and an Instagram campaign, so here we are. The pattern across all 3 of these is the same. You tried to be a thoughtful consumer. The market saw that coming and built a product designed to capture exactly that instinct. Awareness is the only real defense, which brings us somewhere most people assume they are getting a straightforward deal. Their entertainment. But the entertainment squeeze has its own version of this story, and the numbers are just as uncomfortable. Ask yourself the last time was that you sat down to watch something and genuinely felt like you were getting a good deal, not just content filling a screen, an actual good deal. If you are struggling to remember, that is not an accident. The entertainment industry went through a quiet restructuring over the last decade, and the consumer ended up on the wrong side of it. Start with streaming, because the promise was so specific that it is worth holding up against what actually happened. In 2015, Netflix cost $7.99 a month. One app, no commercials, every device. Password sharing was not just tolerated, it was practically encouraged. The pitch was simple and genuinely revolutionary. Pay less than a single movie ticket, watch everything, cancel anytime. For a few years, that was exactly what it was. Then the economics of content got complicated, the studios realized they were feeding a competitor, and everything fragmented at once. Today, if you want access to the shows and films that are actually being talked about, the ones your coworkers mention on Monday morning, you need Netflix, Max, Hulu, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, and probably Apple TV at minimum. Each one runs between $8 and $18 a month, depending on whether you want ads or not. And yes, you are now paying extra to avoid commercials on platforms you're already paying for. That sentence would have sounded absurd in 2015. Currently, the average American household with multiple streaming subscriptions is spending between $90 and $120 a month on them. That is not including the internet. That is not including any premium add-ons. That is just the base subscriptions. Cable in 2010 cost roughly $60 a month, and people called it a ripoff. Streaming didn't replace cable. It became cable, rebuilt from scratch, and charged you more for the transition. The password crackdown made it worse. Netflix alone added nearly 20 million subscribers in the year after it banned account sharing, which tells you everything about how many people had quietly opted out of paying full price. That revenue is now coming from households that previously split the cost. Same product, double the bill. Leaving the house is not the relief it used to be either. A decade ago, taking two people to a major touring concert was a stretch at $200 all in. Today, that $200 is often the starting price for a single ticket, before fees. And the fees deserve their own conversation because this is where the industry has gotten genuinely creative. Facility fees, service fees, order processing fees, a delivery fee for a digital barcode sent directly to your phone. These do not cover real costs. They are revenue, repackaged as administrative inevitability. Ryan is a teacher in Phoenix. He bought 2 tickets to see an artist he'd followed for years. The tickets were listed at $180 each. At checkout, after facility fees, service fees, and a delivery charge for the QR code emailed to his Gmail account, the total came to $492. He paid it, not because he thought it was fair, because he had already mentally committed, and the fees only appeared at the final screen. That is not a coincidence. That is a design choice. The industry calls it drip pricing. You see the attractive number first and the real number last, when your willingness to walk away is at its lowest. A family of 4 going to a movie currently costs $60 to $80 before a single piece of popcorn is purchased. The concession margin on that popcorn, by the way, is somewhere around 90%. The movie ticket is almost a loss leader designed to get you through the door. None of this means stop enjoying things. It means the price of enjoyment has been restructured in ways that are worth understanding clearly before you hand over the card. But if the entertainment squeeze feels uncomfortable, it is relatively visible. You can see the subscription charge. You can see the ticket price. What comes next is harder to spot because the biggest money traps of 2026 are the ones hiding inside decisions that are supposed to be investments. That is where the big ticket traps live, and the numbers there are in a completely different league. Here's the thing about big financial mistakes. The small ones are visible. You see the delivery fee, you feel the ticket price. But the decisions that do the most damage are usually the ones that feel responsible at the time. The ones that come with paperwork, a handshake, and a congratulations. Those are the ones worth slowing down on. Start with cars because the numbers here have crossed into territory that most people have not fully absorbed. The average new car in America currently costs just over $50,000. That is not a luxury vehicle. That is not a fully loaded truck. That is the average. And because $50,000 is an amount that almost nobody has, sitting in a checking account. The industry has quietly engineered a solution: stretch the loan. 72-month financing is now standard. 84 months is increasingly common. 7 years of payments on a vehicle that begins losing value the moment it leaves the lot. Here is the math on a typical deal: $50,000 financed over 72 months at a 7% interest rate, which is roughly where rates are sitting currently, produces a monthly payment that feels manageable at around $850. What does not get discussed at the dealership is the total interest on that loan. Over 72 months, you will pay just over $11,300 in interest alone. That is $11,000 for the privilege of paying slowly on something worth significantly less with every passing month. A new car loses roughly 20% of its value in the first year. By the time you make your final payment 6 years in, you have paid $51,000 for an asset worth perhaps $22,000. The math on that transaction is not in your favor. Daniel is an engineer in Dallas. Good salary, mid-90s range. He bought a new truck 2 years ago because his old one had high mileage, and he wanted something reliable. Financed it over 72 months and felt comfortable with the payment. He recently ran the full numbers for the first time. By the end of the loan, he will have paid nearly $62,000 for a truck currently valued at around $31,000. He is paying twice the asset's current value to own it outright. He knew cars depreciated. He did not know the gap was that wide. Then there is real estate, and this one requires more nuance, because homeownership is so emotionally loaded that the financial reality rarely gets said plainly. The starter home has been sold as the foundational American financial move for generations. Build equity. Stop throwing money away on rent. Get on the ladder. That logic worked in a specific interest rate environment that no longer exists. With mortgage rates currently hovering around 7%, and home prices still elevated from the pandemic surge, the monthly cost of owning a median-priced home runs between $8,000 and $9,000 when you factor in mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and basic maintenance. Renting that same home in the same neighborhood costs roughly $5,000. Nationwide, new homeowners are currently paying about 37% more per month than renters for equivalent properties. The equity argument is real over a long enough timeline, but in the short to medium term, the cash flow math is brutal, and for someone stretched thin already, that monthly gap is not theoretical. It shows up every single month. The third trap in this category is the quietest one. It sits inside your retirement account, and almost nobody checks it. The difference between an actively managed mutual fund and a low-cost passive index fund is roughly 1% in annual fees. 1% sounds like a rounding error. It is not. If you have $500,000 invested and your fund charges 1% annually versus near zero for an index fund, that single percentage point costs you approximately $1.2 million over 30 years, not in fees paid directly. In compounding growth, that never happened because the money left the account. Actively managed funds underperform the basic S&P 500 index in the vast majority of cases over 10 years. You are paying more for worse results. Check your 401k, and that is your employer-sponsored retirement account, and look at the expense ratio on every fund you are holding. If it is above 0.2%, you are likely overpaying. These are the decisions that feel like adulting. Buying the car, getting the house, saving for retirement. The system is designed to feel responsible. That is exactly what makes it worth examining carefully. And once you can see where the damage is happening, the next step is straightforward, which is exactly what reclaiming your wallet is about. Most financial advice at this point in a video starts to sound like a lecture. Cut this. Stop that. Have you tried discipline? That is not what this is. The goal here is not to make you feel bad about what you have been spending on. The goal is to show you where the value actually went and what still has it, because there are good deals left. They are just not where the marketing is pointing. Start with the car situation, because the fix here is clean and the math is immediate. The single best move in the current auto market is to buy a vehicle that is 3 to 5 years old. Here is why that window is specific. New cars lose roughly 20% of their value in the first year. By year 3, that depreciation curve flattens significantly. The core technology, the engine, the safety systems, the screens, is functionally identical to the new version. The difference is that someone else absorbed the brutal early depreciation and you are buying in after it happened. A car that sold new for $50,000 3 years ago is frequently available today for $28,000 to $32,000. Same reliability, 40% lower cost. Let someone else pay the first-year penalty. That is not a compromise. That is just better math. On streaming, the answer is not to cancel everything and read books by candlelight. It is to stop treating subscriptions like utilities. A utility is something you need continuously. Streaming is not that. The actual strategy is rotation. Subscribe to one service. Watch the shows you want. Cancel before the next billing cycle. Move to the next one. The content is not going anywhere. Netflix is not deleting Seinfeld because you paused your subscription. The whole library waits. Most households that switch to intentional rotation cut their monthly streaming spend from over $100 down to $15 to $20 without actually watching less. Your public library is also worth mentioning here, and genuinely underused. Most library cards currently provide free access to Canopy and Hoopla, which, between them, carry thousands of films, documentaries, and audiobooks. You have already paid for this through local taxes. It is sitting there unused for most people. The grocery aisle correction is simpler than it sounds. Ignore the front of the package entirely. The protein label, the wellness claim, the clean eating badge, none of it is regulated in a way that makes it meaningful. Turn it over. Look at the ingredient list. If the first 3 ingredients are some variation of processed grain, seed oil, and sugar, the word protein on the front is marketing, not nutrition. Eggs, lentils, Greek yogurt, canned fish, these are the actual high-protein, low-cost foods. A dozen eggs currently runs about $3.50. The protein bar next to the register runs $4 and has a third of the nutritional value. The math is not subtle. For live music and entertainment, the refrain is worth sitting with. The most memorable shows most people describe are rarely the stadium ones. They are the smaller rooms. A local venue with a 400-person capacity, a talented regional artist, a $20 ticket, and a bar where you can actually hear the person next to you. The experience is frequently better. The cost is 90% lower. The artist gets a meaningfully higher percentage of the revenue. Every city has this ecosystem. Most people drive past it on the way to the arena and on retirement accounts. Check the expense ratio on every fund you are currently holding. Log in this week, find the number. If it is above 0.2%, look for the index fund equivalent in your plan. Almost every 401k offers one. Switch to it. That single action, done once, could be worth more to your retirement outcome than any other financial decision you make this year. Not because of what you add, because of what stops leaving. Sandra is a nurse in Seattle. She made that one change 18 months ago. Moved her retirement holdings from an actively managed fund, charging 1.1%, to a total market index fund charging 0.03%. She did not increase her contributions. She did not change her budget. That single decision is projected to add over $340,000 to her retirement balance over the remaining 22 years of her career. One afternoon, one change, $340,000. The thread running through all of this is the same one that ran through every section. The market is not neutral. It is designed carefully, deliberately, to capture your attention, manufacture urgency, and extract value before you have had time to think clearly. Knowing that is not cynicism. It is just useful, and useful is what the conclusion is going to make permanent. Here is the clearest way to say what this video has been about. The problem is not that you are spending too much. The problem is that the value of what you are buying has been quietly engineered downward while the price has moved up. That gap is real, it is measurable, and it is not your fault for not seeing it sooner. The system is designed to be invisible. A few things are worth carrying forward. Convenience is the most expensive product on the market. Familiarity is not the same as value. The deals that require the most marketing are usually the ones that need it most. And the financial decisions that feel the most responsible, the car, the house, the retirement fund, are exactly the ones worth examining most carefully. The question to sit with before the next purchase is a simple one. Is this still worth what it costs? Or am I just used to paying it? That distinction, applied consistently, is worth more than any budget spreadsheet. There is a related question this video did not answer. If prices have been restructured upward and quality downward, what happened to the money in between? Where did that margin actually go, and who is holding it? That one is worth understanding next.